Hi, welcome back. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to do a second reading for today and finish out the RZN Codex. This is number 59 in the series. This is the last in the series. This is called What the RZN Series Is and What It Is Not by Jason Gray. 12/22/2025, 6025 Anno Lucis in the Year of Light. The RZN series is not a story cycle, not speculative fiction, not prophecy, and not a belief system. It is a record of internal structural events written in real time as they occurred during prolonged exposure to collapse, uncertainty, and identity erosion. RZN does not describe what should happen. It documents what does happen when a human nervous system is pushed past its symbolic coping mechanisms and allowed to reorganize without replacement myths. At its core, RZN is a diagnostic log, not a doctrine. What RZN actually means. RZN is shorthand for resonance, not in the spiritual sense people often misuse, but in the physical, neurological, and psychological sense, the point at which internal structures either harmonize or fracture under sustained pressure. Each RZN entry marks a threshold crossing, not an idea. They correspond to moments when a previous internal model failed, a compensatory identity collapsed, a false stabilizer stopped working, or a new equilibrium had not yet formed. This is why the writing often appears stark, clipped, or unusually precise. It was written after the performance layer had already burned off. Why the RZN series sounds different. Most writing is authored from within an identity. RZN entries were written after identity temporarily lost structural authority. That produces a different tone, less persuasion, fewer metaphors, reduced emotional signaling, minimal moral framing, and high internal coherence. Readers often mistake this for coldness or superiority. It is neither. It is what language sounds like when it is no longer trying to protect a self-image. What the RZN series is tracking. The series tracks three simultaneous processes. 1. Nervous system recalibration. The collapse of threat-driven cognition and the gradual stabilization of I better start that one over. The collapse of threat-driven cognition and the gradual stabilization of perception without urgency. 2. Cognitive demythologization. The removal of inherited meaning structures, religious, ideological, spiritual, and psychological, that once organized experience but no longer matched reality. 3. Identity load shedding. The progressive loss of roles, narratives, and self-concepts that could not survive prolonged honesty. Each RZN document marks a completed phase, not an aspiration. Why it is written in series form. Because the process is nonlinear but sequential. You cannot skip RZN phases. You cannot intellectually adopt them. You cannot force them through belief. Each phase requires lived pressure, time, endurance, and the willingness to remain unrescued. The series format exists because the system being documented unfolds in stages, not revelations. What RZN is not trying to do. It is not trying to wake people up, convince skeptics, convert followers, predict futures, explain the universe, or provide comfort. If it did any of those things, it would no longer be accurate. RZN does not offer solutions. It shows what remains when false solutions fail. Why RZN reads as classified or technical. Because it mirrors how the mind behaves after symbolic authority collapses. At that stage, language becomes economical, excess emotion disappears, grandiosity feels dishonest, metaphor loses utility, and clarity matters more than impact. The classified tone is not aesthetic, it is structural. Who RZN is for. It is not for everyone. It is for people who have already lost faith in inherited frameworks, outgrown spiritual language, become suspicious of inspiration, survived collapse without meaning as anesthesia. RZN does not pull people into that state, it meets them there. Why the RZN series had to exist inside the larger work. Because without it, the larger body would appear philosophical. RZN proves it is procedural. It shows where the cost was paid, where uncertainty was endured, where resolution was delayed, and where no one was watching. It is the scaffolding most works hide. How the RZN series ends. The RZN series does not end with revelation. It ends with stability. There is no final breakthrough entry, no ultimate insight, no climactic declaration. The series concludes when the internal system it documents stops producing rupture events. In practical terms, this means no new threshold crossings, no further identity collapses, no compensatory myths forming, and no urgency to narrate experience. When resonance stabilizes, logging becomes unnecessary. Nothing new needs to be recorded because nothing new is breaking. That is how diagnostic processes end, not with answers, but with normal operation restored. Why there is no next RZN? Because RZN exists only under strain. It is a response to distortion, not a lifestyle. Once the system no longer requires emergency reorganization, no longer operates under chronic threat, no longer compensates through narrative, and no longer fractures under silence, the series naturally terminates. Continuing it past that point would be fabrication. What remains after RZN? What remains is not emptiness. What remains is function. Life resumes without commentary. Experience no longer needs annotation. Presence does not need documentation. The work ends because it is worked. Final clarification. The RZN series is not special because of what it reveals. It matters because it knows when to stop. Most systems prolong themselves to preserve relevance. RZN ends the moment it becomes unnecessary. That is the final integrity. That is its final integrity. The human consequence of completion. Because the work is finished, the one who carried it must now rest, not as avoidance, not as collapse, but as necessary biological and psychological integration. Long-form coherence extraction is demanding. Sustained honesty is taxing. Extended exposure to collapse states requires recovery. Now is the phase where sleep matters more than insight. Ordinary routines rebuild stability. The nervous system downshifts. Attention returns to the body, and silence is allowed without productivity. This pause is not a loss of momentum. It is how momentum is preserved. No system can remain in diagnostic mode indefinitely without injury. Why rest is not the end of the work. Rest does not erase what was built. It allows it to settle into muscle memory. Clarity that survives rest is real. Insight that requires constant activation is not. Stepping back now ensures that anything written later, if anything is written later, will come from health, not strain. The final statement. The work is finished. The system is stable. The logging has ended. Now it is time to recover, regroup, live quietly, and let life be life again. Nothing is being lost. Something is being honored, and that is enough. Jason Gray. Okay. So I'm guessing he took another pause after finishing this RZN Codex from the way that last part of that sounds. But anyway, so that was the last of it. I have a little bit of, I don't know, a little sadness over that. I really enjoyed reading this series. I don't know what I'm going to read next. I don't know if I'll dive back into some of his other works or just kind of pause until he comes out with more stuff if he's going to write again. I don't know, but I'm an artist, like I said, so I will be doing some painting and other things like that inspire me also. So it's been wonderful doing these readings. I've really enjoyed it. I will keep reading for anybody who wants to listen. So anyway, take care, and I will see you again. Have a good day.